What if I told you that every government on Earth, the most powerful institutions in human history, are all prisoners? Not prisoners of war, not prisoners of politics, but prisoners of a system. A system so perfectly designed that escaping it would mean destroying civilization itself. The United States owes $38 trillion. Japan, $9 trillion. And the entire world, over $315 trillion in debt. That's more than 3 times everything humanity produces in a year. But here's the question no one asks. If every country is in debt, who do they all owe? Follow that question far enough, and you'll find something deeply unsettling. The world owes money to itself, a perfect loop, a circular trap, a maze with no exit. And this wasn't an accident. Over 3 centuries, 4 men built this system, brick by brick. Let's go back to a time before the trap existed. Before 1694, when a king needed money, he borrowed it the simple way, from a wealthy merchant. Sometimes he paid it back. Sometimes he didn't. If he defaulted, the lender lost money and life went on. Debt was temporary. It had a beginning and an end. Then came war. England versus France. King William III was desperate. His treasury was empty. His reputation? Worse. No one wanted to lend him money. Until one man walked in, William Paterson, a Scottish merchant, a dreamer, a man who had failed at almost everything until this moment. He made the king an offer. One simple idea. I'll get you the money, but you'll never have to pay it back. Here was the deal. A group of wealthy merchants would lend the crown money. In return, the government would pay them interest, not for a few years, but forever, 8% every single year. And to manage this system, they created something new, the Bank of England. Think about what just happened. The loan would never be repaid. The interest would never stop. And as long as the government could tax its people, money would flow from ordinary citizens to wealthy investors forever. But Paterson's real genius came next. The Bank of England was given the power to print money, backed by government debt. The government's IOU became actual currency. The more the government borrowed, the more money existed. Debt was no longer a problem. It became the fuel. Paterson died in 1719, not particularly rich, but the system he built? It's still running over 300 years later. Britain has never fully paid off its debt. Not once. The first brick was laid. By the 1800s, governments across Europe were drowning in debt. They borrowed for wars, for palaces, for survival. But every loan was still slow, messy, and limited. Then came a man who changed everything. Nathan Rothschild. His family built something no one else had ever done before. A banking network spanning 5 countries: London, Paris, Frankfurt, Vienna, Naples. 5 brothers. One system. When Napoleon tore Europe apart, Rothschild didn't just lend money. He transformed how governments borrowed. He bought government bonds at low prices and sold them across the continent. For the first time in history, debt became something you could trade. A British bond could be owned in France, used in Germany, and sold in Austria. And suddenly, debt was everywhere. Before Rothschild, if a king defaulted, one lender suffered. After Rothschild, default didn't hurt one person. It threatened the entire system. The debt was now global, interconnected, impossible to escape. Governments weren't just in debt anymore. They were trapped by it. And then came one of the most famous moments in financial history, the Battle of Waterloo. Rothschild received news of Napoleon's defeat before anyone else. What did he do? He sold British bonds. The market panicked. Prices crashed. Then quietly, he bought everything back at the bottom. Hours later, the official victory news arrived. The market exploded upward, and Rothschild walked away richer than ever. He didn't fight a war. He didn't fire a shot. He simply knew first. The second brick was laid. Fast forward to America. 1907. The financial system collapses. Banks fail. People panic. Crowds rush to withdraw their money. But the vaults are empty. The system is on the edge of collapse. Then one man steps in. J.P. Morgan. At 70 years old, already the most powerful banker in America, he locks the top bankers in a room and refuses to let them leave until they fix the system. And somehow, they do. The crisis ends. But Morgan knew something important. He couldn't save the system forever. So in 1910, in total secrecy, his allies traveled to a remote island, Jekyll Island, Georgia, using fake names, avoiding attention. For 9 days, they designed a new system, a permanent solution, the Federal Reserve. But there was a problem. Americans hated central banks, so they hid it. They made it look decentralized. 12 regional banks, democratic on the surface, but underneath, the real power stayed in one place, the power to create money. Here's how it works. The government needs money. It issues a bond. The Federal Reserve creates money out of nothing and buys it. The government spends. The debt remains. And taxpayers pay the interest. Before this system, there were limits. Gold. Real money. After this, no limits. The government could borrow endlessly. Because someone would always buy. The third brick was laid. By the 1970s, the system was thriving, until inflation exploded. Enter Paul Volcker. His solution was brutal. He raised interest rates to nearly 20%. Inflation collapsed. But something else did too. Developing nations, countries like Mexico, Brazil, Argentina had borrowed heavily in US dollars. When interest rates spiked, their debt became impossible to pay. In 1982, Mexico made a shocking announcement. We can't pay. This should have broken the system. But it didn't. Because something stepped in, the IMF. They didn't erase the debt. They didn't fix the problem. They gave just enough money for countries to keep paying interest. And in return, a price. Cut public spending. Sell national assets. Open your economy. Give up control. All to stay in debt. Forever. And this pattern repeats again and again and again. The final brick was laid. Now step back and look at the system. Patterson made debt permanent. Rothschild made it global. Morgan made it infinite. Volcker made it inescapable. Together, they built a machine powered by debt, a system that now holds over $315 trillion. And here's the truth. It can never be repaid, because the debt is the money. If you remove the debt, you remove the money supply, and the system collapses. This isn't a flaw. This is the design. And who benefits? Not governments, not citizens, but the institutions that hold the debt, collecting interest every single year, forever. Here's the hardest truth. These men weren't villains. They were problem solvers. Each one fixed a crisis. Each solution worked. But together, they built a trap. And now, every country on Earth is inside it. The debt was never meant to be repaid. The interest was always meant to flow upward. And the system was never meant to have an exit. If this changed how you see the world, share it. And subscribe, because this machine has many more layers left to uncover.